Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest developments from the civil war in Sudan, which is nearing its 2-year mark. Now, the paramilitary rapid support forces say it has killed dozens of soldiers in a drone strike on Sudan's presidential palace in Khartoum. This comes after the Sudanese army, led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, recaptured the iconic palace from the RSF earlier today, marking a major turning point in the civil war. The RSF declared that the battle for the Republican Palace is not over. It claims its forces killed 89 enemy personnel and destroyed several military vehicles. Reports also suggest that 3 journalists were killed in the strikes. Now, earlier, the Sudanese army announced it had taken full control of the palace and several ministries that were under the RSF's control in the capital. The army vowed to continue advancing on all fronts until every inch of Sudan is purged of the RSF forces and their supporters.
In a timeless heroic battle, our forces crowned their successes today in Khartoum, where they were able to crush the remnants of the terrorist militia of head of the paramilitary rapid support forces Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo in the areas of central Khartoum, the Arab market, and the buildings of the Republican Palace, a symbol of the sovereignty, pride, and dignity of the Sudanese people, and the buildings of the ministries.
On social media, soldiers shared videos appearing to be inside the presidential palace, exchanging congratulations on their decisive victory. Sporadic gunfire could also be heard throughout Khartoum, though it wasn't clear if it involved fighting or was celebratory in nature. The scene today is a stark contrast to April of 2023, when paramilitary fighters first overran the palace as war erupted between the RSF, led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, and the Sudanese army. At the time, the RSF swiftly took control of Khartoum's streets, with the army-aligned government fleeing to Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast. In recent months, the army has appeared to turn the tide of the war, first advancing in central Sudan to reclaim territory before shifting focus on Khartoum. Now, central Khartoum, where the presidential palace stands alongside ministries and the capital's business district, has seen fierce fighting after army troops surged through the city recently. Today's takeover means the RSF, which is looking to form a parallel government in Sudan, have been mostly expelled from Khartoum, although they still maintain control over territories elsewhere in Sudan. Burhan's forces, including Sudan's military and allied militias, have been advancing against the RSF since the start of this year. They retook a key refinery north of Khartoum and then pushed in on the RSF positions around the capital. Now, in January, it broke an almost 2-year RSF siege on the General Command headquarters, allowing troops to merge with other battalions and encircle the RSF in the city center. In February, the Sudanese military called for diplomatic support for a new government, which it says it wants to form after fully recapturing Khartoum from the rival forces. But the recent fighting has led to an increase in civilian casualties and has worsened the humanitarian crisis. Nearly 2 years of the civil war has reportedly killed 150,000 people, displaced over 12 million, put at least 8 million on the brink of starvation, and nearly 25 million, which is around half of Sudan's population, suffer dire food insecurity. The international community has repeatedly called for a political solution, but with both sides still determined to fight, peace remains elusive, As Sudan's civil war nears its second anniversary, the stakes are higher than ever. So what happens next? Will the army's advances bring stability or deepen the crisis? Now, to discuss this, we have with us Federico Donnelly, an international relations professor at the University of Trieste in Italy. Welcome to Firstpost.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Professor. Now, with the Sudanese army recapturing the presidential palace in Khartoum, only to face this immediate RSF retaliation via the drone strikes, what does this escalation reveal about the balance of power and the evolving nature of the conflict?
This escalation is in some way a confirmation that the balance of power on the battleground has changed, especially during the last couple of months, as you said before. And I think that the turning point could be for the control of Khartoum. Most probably the RSF will try to keep some position by using different tactics like they did with drones. Most probably they would like to try to control still some neighboring areas in the Khartoum and the Twin City, especially by adopting insurgency tactics. At the same time, if we analyze the conflict, the civil conflict overview, we have to consider that in other regions, RSF is still very strong, and the withdrawal from Khartoum and Khartoum area in some way also has been balanced by the conquer and retake of some other area in the northern Darfur.
Right, and given the army's previous vow to form a civilian government once it regained control of Khartoum, how realistic is that promise now? And what steps would need to follow to make this happen?
Of course, there's more opportunity that especially the SAF, the Sudanese army forces, will try to establish a government, no more in Port Sudan, but in Khartoum, even though we have to be clear that Khartoum is a completely different city after 2 years of civil war. Nowadays, there are around 2 million people there, and before the civil war, there were 8 million. At the same time, many of the buildings, institutional buildings, are completely disrupted by the war. So Khartoum is symbolically definitely important, but I'm not sure that it would guarantee more stable process of government and state building. At the same time, the processes that is ongoing in Darfur with the agreement that you mentioned before and the meeting in Kenya of 2 weeks ago would in some way open the opportunity to establish 2 different governments, one in the eastern Sudan and the other one in the western Sudan.
Right, and how would that then, with that development, affect regional stability and international efforts which have been aimed at brokering a ceasefire or facilitating a democratic transition in Sudan?
About the democratic transition, it's really hard to see, at least from today. But in terms of ceasefire, it could be possible that the RSF trying to, we can say, focus more on Darfur and accept a ceasefire in order to reorganize itself. The main problem is who could be the stakeholders. So that's the real problem. Who can try to manage to broker this ceasefire?
Right. Professor, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Alyson.
Good afternoon.
Making headlines in India well before you landed here.
New Delhi has raised concerns in the recent past vis-a-vis the Khalistani separatists that operate in New Zealand. How do you propose to address these concerns?
In our democracy, we believe in the freedom of speech.
Organizations like the Al-Qaeda or ISIS were to hold a referendum in New Zealand, something related to one of your Western partners. Would you say the same?
We have very well-defined laws in our democracy.
No specific conversation on Khalistan on this visit.
It was raised with me. I also raised back our position.
Are you willing to be open to these concerns from New Delhi?
As I keep coming back to you to say, we have strong laws in our system.
think that Ukraine is at its weakest position?
This war is not about Ukraine.
Do you believe that your president was insulted? Yes or no question. Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Diplomacy will work?
Yes,
Do you
it
think
will.
Russia will give up the territory if there is no ceasefire? Do you propose to keep fighting?
We are ready to resist.
Do you think there will be peace?
Many countries gave us 3 days.
President Trump said you don't have any cards.
We do not have another choice.
How do you keep fighting?
You are asking me once again the same question.
Because you've not answered my question.
We have enough capacities to keep fighting.